This is Jesse Rojas. He's a representative for Sylvia Lopez. Sylvia is a farm worker from Fresno, California. Jesse, let me start with you. First of all, tell us who Sylvia Lopez is and what has happened to her in the last 2 years.
Well, Sylvia Lopez has been heading the decertification process in a farm in Fresno, California. There's over 3,000 farm workers in the Central Valley in California that do not need the United Farm Workers. And on November 5th, 2013, they petitioned the state agency called the Agricultural Labor Relations Board to do an election to kick out the UFW. They refused to do this election 3 times. They collected thousands of signatures over and over again until finally, after several demonstrations, they got their election. Well, next month is going to be the 2-year anniversary of the ALRB state agency not wanting to count their ballots. So up until now, they have refused to count their ballots from that decertification election.
Yeah, so this is the United Farm Workers. They had won an election back in the 90s. They had not bargained for a contract. No contract was agreed to. So 20 years pass, and many of the workers at this farm, called Gowan Farms in the Central Valley, didn't even know that they worked at a unionized farm until in 2012, the UFW came back and started demanding 3% of their pay. And I understand, Jesse, correct me if I'm wrong, Sylvia personally collected almost 3,000 signatures twice?
Yes, she collected thousands of signatures with some of her main co-workers twice because they refused to count those signatures petitions.
So why would the state labor board refuse to count votes from a decertification election? What possible reason would they have to not count those votes?
Well, you see, the reason is the ALRB, which was established by Governor Jerry Brown to protect farm worker rights. That was the original intention.
The first time he was governor, right?
The first
back
time
in
he was
the 70s,
governor, yeah, back in the 70s. Also when he brought the public employee unions. They depend on each other. The ALRB depends on the UFW survival, and the UFW depends on the ALRB survival. So they work for each other. And as you may have seen recently, there are a lot of top officials at the ALRB that were former UFW organizers and students.
Yeah, so just so everyone is clear, you have a state labor authority that exists to mediate disputes between farm unions and farm workers. There's really only one farm union to speak of, the UFW. So it really is true that they depend on each other, and the ALRB, it's certainly not in their interest to have the UFW decertified at this farm. Would you say that's the case?
Exactly.
And I understand Sylvia has a statement she's given to you, if you'd like to read that now.
Absolutely. Hi, my name is Sylvia Lopez, and I headed the decertification process against the United Farm Workers in our company, Gowan Farms in Fresno, California. This is a union that abandoned us for over 20 years and that has nothing to offer us but to take 3% of our paychecks and have control over our lives. After several demonstrations, we finally had our election on November 5th, 2013 to vote out the UFW. But yet the ALRB state agency has refused to count our ballots. It is almost 2 years now, and yet our votes have not been counted. I wish I could be here today to speak, but due to family health issues, I'm unable to. But I am glad that Jesse's here representing over 3,000 of us farm workers. We need help so that our voices can be heard and so that the union and government corruption in California can be exposed. I appreciate all of you here today that are listening to our struggle and hope that you can shine the light on the biggest labor dispute in California. We are the highest paid industry workers, and we do not need a union. We know what we want and what is better for our families. We are not ignorant, even though that's what the UFW would like everyone to believe. We want to work in peace, and we want our civil rights to be respected. We want the Agricultural Labor Relations Board of California to count our votes and the UFW to respect our choice. Is that too much to ask for?
Unfortunately, apparently, it is too much to ask for. Jesse, I think Sylvia touched on one of the things that most irritates the farm workers there, and that's this issue of control. Tell me, besides the pay, they don't want to give up 3% of their pay, but what else would a unionized collective bargain farm do for the workers that they don't like, that they don't need? What specifically bothers them about the UFW?
The main thing about the UFW is they have harassed them at their homes, at their workplace, over and over again, every single day. They've showed up to their homes, at night, during the afternoon, to try to force them into the union. They've even accused them of being illegals and calling immigration on them if they don't join the union. Big irony behind the UFW, calling you out for being illegal. They've also, with this contract, with the UFW and the state-mandated contract, it wouldn't allow them to demonstrate. It would shut them out from protesting and demonstrating, which is their fundamental civil right. And the other thing that's big to them in this particular company is this company has a open-door policy. What that means is they can come and go during the season as they want. In most farms in California, if you don't show up to work for several days or several weeks, you usually cannot come back and get your job because it's a seasonal job. In this particular company, workers can leave for a couple of days, leave for a couple of weeks, and maybe go work somewhere else or go take care of some family needs, and they can always come back and get their job again and work again. Well, with this contract, they will be unable to do so.
So I think, this issue of freedom to negotiate directly with your employer, your own hours, when you work, how long you work, to come and go. They feel like the UFW is going to come between them and their employer, and that's in particular what they don't like, correct?
Yes.
So this is very indicative of the sort of one-size-fits-all model of traditional collective bargaining. But one size doesn't fit all, and has it ever, and I think especially as we move into the 21st century, people are so used to choice, and everything's tailored to them individually, whether it's our apps on our phone or a lot of people are working from home these days. Unions just seem more and more outdated, and I think Sylvia's plight is a good example of that. Just let me ask you this. I had the pleasure of meeting many of the farm workers there in Fresno, and what seems to irritate them to me is that the UFW seems to think that they can speak for them all because they're all Latino, they're all farm workers, whatever, as if they all have the same opinion. Talk about the pressure that Sylvia and those workers felt from that union and the intimidation tactics.
Well, similar to what they were saying, the day of the decertification election at Garawan Farms, the ALRB officials, state officials, have told the employees that they only needed a pay stub or their worker ID to vote. Come down the morning when they show up to vote at the farm, at the last minute, the ALRB officials requested them 2 forms of ID to vote. Now, this is California. You don't even need an ID to vote in a normal election. But now you need 2 forms of ID to vote to get rid of a union. So this really irritated a lot of the farm workers. They had already shown up to work with their pay stubs or their worker IDs, and now they're requesting them 2 forms of ID. The other thing that the ALRB did, it segregated the employees. It separated them from non-UFW supporters to UFW supporters, which if you look at this particular case in this company, over 90% of this employees do not want the UFW. It's a very small amount of employees that might want the UFW, and it's maybe really because they don't know what they're not going to bring to the table. So the fact of them showing up to their homes, late at night, showing up to work every single day during lunchtime and pressuring them into trying to join the union. The other irony behind this is the UFW has ran a phony PR campaign for a while now, bashing the very same fruits that they pick. So this is a union that's claiming to represent employees at this farm, but yet they're running campaigns, PR campaigns, to talk bad about the fruit they pick. Same thing as what they mentioned, to blackmail or pressure the company and the employees to eventually give in to what they want.
So I think you can see from all the workers represented here, the 2 constants, it seems to me, and this is true whenever I've been involved with any of these campaigns or issues, is a lack of choice and intimidation. I mean, those seem to be the recurring themes in organized labor that offend workers, turn workers off over and over again. It's the lack of accountability, it's the the thuggish behavior, whether it's pressuring people to sign cards and then using those cards as a vote. It's very undemocratic. It's very un-American. I think we're going to open up the floor. If anyone would like to ask any of these workers questions.
My name's Jordan Bruno. Matt, you mentioned different legislation going to be pushed tomorrow at the White House that makes unionization easier and kind of facilitates it. Is there any legislation going on at the federal level that could serve as a counterweight to that and that would defend these union voices? Karen,
yeah, so I mean, obviously a national right to work law would be great. There's the Employee Rights Act, which provides for a lot of the freedoms that are absent in today's labor regime. There's a lot of interesting things going on at the local level, too, where you have in Kentucky, for example, counties who are sick of the state legislature dragging their heels on passing a right-to-work law for the whole state. So you have communities taking it upon themselves to pass local ordinances that give their county workers the option to opt out. I think it's really good to see communities take the lead on that because it can be so hard to change a national labor regime or any regime of any kind. James, do you want to add to that?
Well, I would just sort of second and I ask the workers what policies. So we've heard some fairly negative ways the unions have interacted. I don't think the solution to that is to ban all unions. But what policies do you think would make the unions more accountable to you to prevent the sorts of abuses that you guys or Jesse, in your situation that Sylvia has experienced?
Well, I think speaking for this farm workers, all they want is their votes to be counted because what the ALRB is arguing is that the company or the employer pressure them to vote out the UFW. Well, you can't really know until you count the ballots. It doesn't work this way. You should be able to count the votes, and then if there's any quote-unquote unfair labor practices that were reported, then you investigate. That's the way it usually works. But the way the ALRB has worked with the UFW using the laws in California has made it very difficult for these employees to just be able to follow the regular Agricultural Labor Relations Act, which is you petition an election, you collect enough signatures for the majority of the employees, and then you vote, and then you count the ballots, and then all types of investigations or claims that come from all parties then are investigated. This time it worked different. They pushed out as many legal terminology as they could to avoid the votes from being counted, and then they put together a 6-month hearing with an administrative law judge that would determine if the ballots were to be counted. Well, this administrative law judge happens to be paid by the ALRB 6 figures a year. He's an employee of the ALRB, so how can he be neutral about this case? So all around this, having a state agency like the ALRB working on the side of the UFW and using taxpayer dollars on top of that, it's very unfair, and I think it needs to be reformed.
And I think for the UFW specifically, it's an existential issue. Their membership was, reported to be anywhere from the 50s to 80,000 at its heyday, and now it's something close to 5,000 or 10,000. This is a very large farm. It's one of the largest farms in the country, and for them to be successful here, I think is necessary for their survival long term. So they actually can't afford to lose this. And Jesse, correct me if I'm wrong, but I bet if they had thought they had won that election, those ballots would have been counted 2 years ago.
Of course, if they had, like he mentioned, if they had over 65% for sure of the employees wanting the union, they would have voted the ballots right away. And it's important to note, Matt's right, there's a little bit over 3,000 active UFW members now. So if this contract was to be put in place, it would automatically double the income and the membership of the UFW. So it's definitely a big win for them. But you would picture if the overall goal of this union is to better the working conditions and improve the wages of workers, they wouldn't be focusing on this particular farm, which pays the employees the highest wages in the agricultural industry, has the best working conditions. Why not go focus on other farms that actually do might need some help to improve wages and working conditions?
So proud.
It's in the back, in the orange.
Belén Barriga with Telesur.
And my question is, we've been in so many rallies and protests and march where there's a lot of people there, and especially unions are the ones that organize this, promising better salaries and also more benefits. Why people keep trusting them?
I can speak for that, at least in terms of the United Farm Workers in California. Every single person that shows up with the United Farm Workers shirt, it's not an actual worker, they're all paid by the union. So in my experience, I've been at dozens of demonstrations in California. Every single person on the side of the union, it's not an actual worker, they've all been paid for, and they are staging this just for PR stunts. In fact, I had at a protest a few months ago, I talked to some of the employees there, so call them. And while the UFW organizer was not around, I tried to talk to him, and he basically said, "Oh, they picked me off of the Coordinate store, and they paid me $100 to come here." So, in my experience, the unions, it's staged, and a lot of the tactics they use are just like a mob or a cartel.
And meanwhile, we organized 1,000 actual ground farm workers last August to protest at the State Labor Board, and every single one of them was an actual worker and very passionate.
And if I may add something, the first protest that the workers did before we got involved as activists, they had over 3,000 farm workers that walked out of their job and they walked down the street. If you look back at history, the biggest protest that Cesar Chavez ever had was 1,000 people. Right here, there was 3,000 real farm workers saying, "We don't want the union, we've had enough."
So,
Well, thanks everyone. I think it's been a great discussion. I'm really proud to sit up here with these workers who are trying really hard to exercise their freedom of association, guaranteed in the First Amendment of the Constitution. Let's not forget. Just in closing, I will say that it is pretty amazing that private entities like organized labor groups can have carve-outs for things like the First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, that people can be forced to associate with them, people can be forced to financially support them. I think it's time that we rethink labor relations in the United States and make it a more free, more open, and more fair system. And we hope today that this will help spur that discussion. So thank you all very much, and thanks for the panelists. Let's hear it for them.